Masechta Shabbos, Perek Gimel, Mishnah Aleph. Kira shesikua bekasher begvava. One of the Lamatas malachas is mavir, lighting a fire. This malacha includes not only lighting a fire in the first place, but even making an existing fire bigger, as we spoke in the previous parak, shamayata, tilting the nair so that the oil can get closer to the wick. That's also mavir. And stirring glowing coals, shamayachta begecholim, which we spoke at the end of the first parak, to make them burn more brightly, is also a chelak or tolda of mavir. So to prevent people from stirring coals on Shabbos, the Chachamim answered putting food over hot coals before Shabbos and letting it remain there through Shabbos, because a person might mix the coals on Shabbos. The Mishnayos are going to discuss when this halacha applies, when it doesn't. So kira sheisikur b'kasher v'gvava. Kira is a rectangular stove upon which two pots can be placed with a fire burning beneath them. So if it was heated with straw, ubigvava, chips of wood, nice and alea tavshil, we may place cooked food on it on Friday and let it remain there on Shabbos. This is mutter because straw and chips of wood burn too quickly to form coals. So when a stove is fueled with either of these substances, there is no concern that one might shamayach begechal. Begefetz ube'etzim. However, if the stove is heated with pulp or large pieces of wood which do form coals, the loyitain, one may not place cooked food upon it before Shabbos and leave it there, because we're concerned that he will mix the coals on Shabbos, which is usher from the malacha of mavir. Using a stove heated with the last two types of fuels is usher unless before Shabbos he shovels out the coals, he removes the coals from the stove, or he places ash over them. Once the coals have been removed or are covered, there's no gzeira, there's no chash anymore that one will be chaysa the gechalim on Shabbos. Covering burning coals with ashes cools them, and it can be assumed that once someone has deliberately done an act that cools the coals in the stove, he has stopped thinking about cooking the food. Hence, we need not be concerned that he will stir the coals to cook the food faster. Beis Shammai say, we may place hot water on the stove but not cooked food. Why not? Because even after the coals were shoveled away, some embers still remain, and Beis Shammai are concerned that one might stir them. Therefore, even in this case, Beis Shammai also leaving cooked food on the stove. However, Beis Shammai agree that one may leave hot water. This is because water heats up quickly, becoming as hot as required even if one doesn't stir the coals. Nevertheless, Beis Shammai is matter this only after the coals were removed or covered, and just maybe some embers are there. Beis Hillel, we may place both hot water and cooked food on it. Nacha machlekes, Beis Shammai emrim neidlin avaloi machzirin, Beis Hillel emrim af machzirin. What are we talking about over here? So another machlekes by Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel by using a kira whose coals were removed or covered. The machlekes concerns a cooked item that one left the heter on the stove, hot water according to Beis Shammai, or any other type of cooked food according to Beis Hillel. The question is whether after removing the item from the stove on Shabbos is one allowed to put it back. So Beis Shammai say the neidlin avaloi machzirin. Why? You could take it, but you can't put it back. Beis Shammai say that once a person removes the hot water from the stove on Shabbos, he may not put it back because it looks like he's cooking. He's not actual cooking because the oven's not hot anymore, but by putting it back, it looks like he is putting something on the stove. Beis Hillel say that one may return the removed food to the stove because they hold that putting food back does not appear like cooking. However, this is true only if the person kept holding the food the entire time it was off the stove. Once he puts it down on a table, for example, Beis Hillel agree that he may no longer put it back on the stove because he would then indeed give the impression that he is cooking it. And that's why we have this concept when you take it out, if you're taking from the Shalom Del Shabbos, so you have to hold it the whole time you're serving and you can't put it down. And if you put it down, then you can't put it back in the pot. Mishnah Beis, Tanur sheisiku b'kasher b'gvava. The Mishnah now discusses a tanur, which is the oven which is narrower on the top than it is at the bottom. Because of its shape, a tanur doesn't lose its heat easily and is treated more stringently than a kira. So tanur sheisiku b'kasher b'gvava liyitin bein mitoiche bein me'al gabav. If a tanur was heated even with straw or chips of wood, one may not place food either inside it or on top of it. Although some types of fuel do not turn into coals, they do create some small embers, and we're concerned that a person might stir these embers because in a tanur it's much hotter and would keep the heat going. A tanur retains enough heat that it can cook food even after the fuel is used up and only embers remain. One might therefore stir the embers to make the food cook faster. Since the prohibition applies even to a tanur that was heated with straw or chips of wood, it certainly applies to one heated with pulp or large pieces of wood. Moreover, even if the coals formed by the pulp and wood were removed or covered with ash, the Issa still applies because the Tana remains so hot that it's concerned that one might nevertheless still be chayse b'gechol. Kupach sheisiku b'kash v'gvava harei zeke kirayim. A kupach that was heated with straw or chips of wood is treated like a kira. What's a kupach? A kira is an oven that has room for two pots on it. It's rectangular. A kupach is square. It has room for only one pot on it. It gets even hotter because it's more compact, so it gets even hotter than a kira. So the hottest oven is the tanner, the second hottest oven is the kupach, which has room for one pot. And the reason why it's hotter is because once you put the pot on it, all the heat gets retained in the oven. I think a kira is a little bit bigger, but it's also much more open because it has room for two pots on top. So kupach sheisiku b'kash v'gvava harei kirayim. A kupach that was heated with straw or chips of wood is treated like a kira, just as one may leave hot food on a kira that was heated with kasha b'gvava, as we learned in the previous Mishnah. So too, one may leave hot food on a kupach that was heated with these substances. However, if it was heated with pulp or large pieces of wood, it's treated as a tanner, which is going to be also to put anything on it. As told earlier, in regard to a tanner, one may not leave food on a kupach that was heated with these substances, even if the coals were removed or covered. Mishnah Gimel. Ein nice beitza b'tzad hamecha mishvil shetes galgal. Min ha-Torah, it's also to cook on Shabbos only when using the heat that has fire as its source. Cooking with heat from the sun is not also midiraisa, since it's not how cooking is normally done. The Mishnah is going to discuss cooking not directly over a fire under the sun, but by the heat of an object or substance that itself has been heated by fire or by the sun. So, ein noisen beitza b'tzad hamecha mishvil shetes galgal. We may not place an egg next to a hot kettle on Shabbos in order that it should roll, which means to make it slightly cooked. Besides a soft-boiled egg. A raw egg doesn't roll easily. As the egg begins to cook or roast, it hardens or rolls more easily. The Mishnah refers to the slight degree of roasting, that it's enough to make the egg roll. Not an egg roll, but an egg roll, even though the kettle is not on the fire. This is because it's midiraisa, it is also not only to cook directly over a fire, but even by the heat of something that it itself had been heated by a fire, which is known as telda sa'or, which is a derivative of the fire. The Mishnah is teaching that even cooking with such an object is also midiraisa from the malacha of oife, baking, mevashal, cooking, and we may not break an egg open and fry it on scarves that had been heated by the sun. Although cooking with heat whose source is the sun, whether under the sun itself or with something heated by the sun, the rice is mutter. The Chachamim asked for cooking with something that's been heated by the sun, because they were concerned, the gzeira, that this might lead to cooking with something that had been heated by a fire, which would be included in the malacha of oife, baking, mavashal, cooking. Rabbi Yossi matir. Rabbi Yossi says cooking an egg on the sudarin, on the sun-heated scarves, is mutter, because the Chachamim did not ask for cooking with something that has been heated by the sun. Rabbi Yossi is not concerned that people confuse a sun-heated scarf with heated by a fire. He agrees, however, that cooking by the heat of a kettle is forbidden, even after it has been removed from the fire, since the kettle is something heated by the fire. But we may not bury an egg in the sand or in the dust of the roads that have become hot in the sun in order to roast it. Rabbi Yossi agrees that this is usher because one is allowed to cover an egg in hot sand or dust on Shabbos. Because if one is allowed to cover an egg in hot sand or dust on Shabbos, he might come to cover it in hot ash, which would be usher min ha-Torah. If one were allowed to bury an egg in the sun-heated sand, people might not realize that this is permitted because the sand was not heated by fire. Instead, they might think that burying food in any hot substance is not regarded as cooking. This could lead them to believe that one may bury food even in the ash of coals heated by fire, which would be aser min ha-Torah in the malacha of mevashal. Mishnah Dalet. It once happened that the people of Tveria placed a pipe for cold water in a canal of hot spring water before Shabbos, so that the cold water can be drawn into the pipe would be heated by the surrounding hot spring water on Shabbos. Tveria was known for its hot springs. Since the spring water carried an unpleasant odor, it wasn't fit for drinking, and people preferred not to use it even for bathing. Instead, they heated clean water by the heat of the springs and used that water for drinking and bathing. In order to do this, they constructed a pipe that carried cold water into a canal of hot springs, so the water would be heated by the hot water of the canal. The heated water then ran from the pipe into a bathhouse, which was used by the Anshe Tveria on Shabbos. Once they arranged for this to happen on Shabbos, and let's see what the rest of the story is. Amrlam Chachamim, the Chachamim said to them, what you did was asr because it's similar to wrapping food in a hot substance that increases the food's heat, which is asr. Because it's asr to wrap hot food in any substance that will increase its heat, even if one does so before Shabbos begins. The reason for this is that if this were mutter, one might come to keep his food warm by leaving it buried in ashes containing coals, and if he does that, he might stir that and will lead to the malacha of mavir, which is hatmana, which the fourth parak is going to discuss. So in b'Shabbos, if the water was heated or kept hot on Shabbos, kecham shuchma b'Shabbos is treated like water that was heated by a fire on Shabbos, and that would be asur b'chitza b'shtia. It would be forbidden to bathe and drink in it. Because if somebody was over a malach on Shabbos, it's also to use that item that was cooked until after Shabbos was over. So if they did this on Shabbos, it's going to be asur. B'yantif shechamin shehuchmu b'yantif. But if the water was heated or kept hot on yantif, it's treated like water that was heated over a fire on yantif, which is going to be mutter. But asur b'chitza mutar b'shtia. It's asur to bathe with this water, but it's mutter to drink because yantif is permitted to heat water for the purpose of drinking, but not for bathing. The Torah permits malachas and yantif for the sake of eating and drinking, as well as for any other physical need that is shared by most people. Therefore, it's mutter to heat water either for drinking or for washing one's face, hands, and feet. Washing one's entire body with hot water every day, on the other hand, is not considered a need shared by most people, and therefore water may not be heated for that purpose. Mulyar Hagaruf. A mulyar is a vessel used for heating water that consists of a large bowl for water that's surrounded by a narrow receptacle of coals, and it was emptied of its coals before Shabbos. Shoysen him and b'Shabbos, we may drink hot water that was left in it on Shabbos, that was left in it to keep it hot on Shabbos, because once the coals were removed, the mulyar is not hot enough to add heat to the water, only it's going to keep it warm. Antichi, which is a copper receptacle with a double bottom, with space for coals between the two bottoms, Afal Pisha Grufa, even if it was emptied of its coals before Shabbos, Ein Shoysen Mimena, we may not drink from it on Shabbos. Why not? Because we may not drink hot water that was kept in on Shabbos, since the heat is trapped between the two bottoms, it doesn't escape, even when the coals are removed, and the antichi remains extremely hot. Leaving water inside of it is therefore similar to leaving hot food wrapped in an insulating material that adds heat, which is forbidden, and the water therefore cannot be used. Mishnah Hey, Hamecham Shepinahu. There's a major halachic difference between a keli in which food was cooked and in a keli which food is then transferred to. The vessel in which the food was cooked is called a kli rishon. When an uncooked substance is placed in a kli rishon, it can become cooked by the vessel's contents even after the keli has been removed from the fire. Meaning the pot that was on the fire, if you removed it from the fire, it's called a kli rishon. The keli in which the contents of the kli rishon are transferred to is called a kli sheni. Uncooked food put into a kli sheni will not become cooked by the keli's contents, even if they're very hot, because it's a halachic principle that there ain't no bishul in a kli sheni. Right? And we know the song that Avada, there's no bishul in a kli sheni either. We're not discussing that now, but I'll call upon him. So Hamecham Shapino, if a kettle containing hot water is removed from the fire, one may not put in a small amount of cold water so that it should get warmed up, because the cold water will thus be cooked in the water of the kettle, even though the kettle is no longer on the fire. Hamecham Shapino, which means it was removed from the fire. But you may put a large amount of cold water into the kettle, or you may put even a small amount of cold water into a cup of hot water, in order to warm the cold water, because in both of these cases the water will merely be warmed, not cooked. If a pan or a pot, which is a kli rishon, was removed from the fire and the contents are still boiling, which was hot enough that one's hand would recoil if it came into contact with them, which would be called in halachic terms yad sid ladesbay. Layitin l'sechan tavlin, one may not add spices to them because the spices will thus be cooked. But he may add spices to hot food that's in a bowl or a serving bowl, which would be a kli sheni, because kli shenis are halachically incapable of cooking. Rabbi Yehuda says, one may add spices to any type of hot food, even if it's a kli rishon, provided that it's not on the fire anymore, except food that contains vinegar or fish brine. Because according to Rabbi Yehuda, spices do not cook easily, and therefore they may be added even to a kli rishon after it was removed from the fire. However, Rabbi Yehuda agrees that it's also to add spices to food that contain vinegar or fish brine because they are sharp substances that can cause even spices to become cooked much quicker. Mishnah Vav. We may not place a keli, such as a plate, under a lamp on Shabbos in order to catch a dripping oil in it because the oil which is muktzah will make the plate muktzah. But if you place it there before Shabbos begins, we're allowed to leave it there to catch oil on Shabbos since the person is not doing anything on Shabbos itself. But even if you place the utensil under the lamp before Shabbos began, we may not derive benefit from the oil on Shabbos because the oil is not prepared before Shabbos, and it will be muktzah. The oil itself is muktzah because it's set aside for the mitzvah of fueling the lamp for Shabbos, which was huktzah the mitzvah, and because it cannot be used for anything else, it's going to be considered muktzah machmas iser. When the oil drips onto the plate becomes muktzah because it now serves as a base for the muktzah oil. As a result, the plate can no longer be used for any other purpose. So canceling a utensil's usefulness, which is called bitul kli mehechanoi, by causing it to become muktzah and unmovable, is asur by the chachamim because it is like cementing a utensil in place, which is the malacha of baina, and in some cases probably also makah b'patish as well. Metaltalin ner chodosh. One may move a new, never-used lamp on Shabbos, but not an old one that has already been used. Avalo yashon, but not an old one that has already been used because it became grimy and slimy and repulsive. It is therefore muktzah. We may move all types of lamps on Shabbos, even used ones, except for a lamp that is actively burning on Shabbos, because the lamp is considered a base for the flame and is therefore muktzah. Reb Shimon says that there's no isur of muktzah machmas mius, there's no reason to prohibit a used lamp. However, Reb Shimon agrees that a basas l'davara asur is considered muktzah, even though Reb Shimon generally argues on muktzah altogether as a general rule, but I guess the basas l'davara asur he does hold up. If so, when the lamp is burning, the oil, and the wick will become a base for the muktzah flame, so they're also muktzah and may not be moved. A flame is muktzah machmas gufay because it itself is not a utensil or a food. Reb Shimon Eimer calling it metalman chutz b'nei adelik b'Shabbos. The le'at halacha the parak neisin kli tachas anel kablan itzoytzos. One may place a utensil under a lamp on Shabbos in order to catch the falling sparks and prevent the fire. But he may not place water in the utensil even before Shabbos begins because we therefore extinguish the sparks. When someone pours water into a utensil on Shabbos while the sparks are falling, it's considered to be actively performing the malacha of mechaba. The chacham answered pouring water into the utensil even before Shabbos because somebody might come to this on Shabbos halayim. Ad kan per gimel.